So what the hell is going on politically? And you've pointed this out in many different ways in the past. There's a level of, there are different blind spots on the left and right, politically and morally. And the conversation between the two, or lack thereof, plays out in really bewildering ways at this point. So give me your thinking at the moment on this topic.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I've been extremely alarmed by the way campus culture at a lot of our top schools has changed radically just in the last 2 years. There are these new ideas about safety, and I hear undergraduates often saying things like they just take it for granted that a classroom is supposed to be a safe space. Now, if they mean that the teacher shouldn't insult people or people shouldn't, hit each other, of course. But what they mean is that people should not be exposed to ideas that might make them feel marginalized or demeaned. For example, if somebody were to question affirmative action, that could be threatening to students who might have benefited from affirmative action. Therefore, you can't question it. And it's very strange that people are getting in trouble. And I was dragged before the Equal Opportunity Commission for showing a video that in class that one student objected to one word that a student said in it. All this
Really?
weird,
What was the word?
Disgusting. So it was in the context of a discussion about the dumbfounding scenario, actually. And it was a conversation between two UVA undergraduates, and one of them he's cross-examining the other one. The experimenter cross-examines the other one, and the guy ultimately says, well, I don't know, I can't explain why it's wrong. Well, I guess I just, I have a sister myself, and I would just find it disgusting to watch, to think about having sex with her.
Mm.
So the experimenter follows the script, which is, because people often say something like that. And so the experimenter says, well, okay, you'd find it disgusting, but does that make it wrong? I mean, personally, like if I were to see two men having sex, like I personally would find that disgusting. I wouldn't want to watch it. But, that doesn't make it wrong. I mean, if people are inclined that way, they have every right to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. So, okay, so, I've shown this video 50 times. But by the time class was over, a student had emailed the dean to complain about my homophobia. I thought she must have just missed the part. She must have misunderstood the video. I mean, I said, well, come talk to me tomorrow. Let's look at the. You'll see. He's not condemning homosexuality. He's actually pro-gay rights. But she engineered it. Basically, she brought the class to a standstill. She demanded that I apologize, and finally, she bullied me into apologizing. And finally, I did, just because I had to keep the class going. And this was because it was an intensive class every day for a week. So I apologized, but she didn't like the apology, so she brought me in front of the Equal Opportunity Commission. And there was no way that they were going to convict me.
And this is at UVA?
No, it's at NYU. But the point is, it took like about a month out of my life. And during that time, she mounted a social media. She had other people mount a social media campaign, writing things about how homophobic I am. So it was really a nightmare. And I was so like, what the hell is going on? Like, where is it? It just didn't make any sense. I mean, I've been parts of groups pushing for gay rights. My research is on disgust. Actually, I have a paper showing how you can reduce prejudice against gay people. So I felt like, my intentions are all in the right place. I didn't say anything. What's going on? And then other things similar to that happened to me, and then began happening to lots of other people. And this is in the 2013 to 2014 academic years when this all begins to happen. The campus disinvitations, the words trigger warning and safe space, they barely exist before 2012, but by 2014 they're everywhere. And this is why when Greg Lukianoff, who's the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, when he came to me in the summer of 2014 with his diagnosis that, John, this weirdness going on campus, it's exactly the errors that I learned about in cognitive therapy. Like campus is teaching undergraduates to think in the exact distorted ways that cognitive therapy teaches you not to do, like catastrophizing, mind reading, all those sorts of things. And so I was so busy. I was saying no to everything. But when Greg came to me after my own experiences, I said, oh my God, Greg, this is brilliant. This is what's going on. So that's what led to he and I writing this article that was published in The Atlantic last August. And it was, and we had no idea campuses were going to melt down beginning at Halloween at Yale, Missouri, so many other schools. So a very strange thing is happening, and I think it's so interesting. I mean, it's horrible because it basically has put a chill on free speech. Everyone is afraid of saying anything that will set off the most sensitive student in the class. Professors all over the country are scrubbing their syllabi clean. We're not showing videos that could provoke. We're not saying things. So education is taking a nosedive in this country because everyone's afraid of a big social media storm or being charged with marginalizing or whatever it is. So this is what's happening. And
And this is purely a liberal phenomenon, right? Is there a conservative analog to this, or is this
a
just?
little bit, yeah. So what happens? So there's a wonderful paper on the origin of microaggressions. In fact, if listeners just Google where microaggressions really come from, I wrote a summary of this article. And what these authors, Manning and Campbell, two sociologists, what they point out is that microaggressions, the idea of these, the idea that, like, if I ask an Asian student, where are you from? That's a microaggression because I'm implying that he or she is not American. The idea that this is an act of aggression is an odd idea, but the whole culture of microaggressions, they point out, only emerges in places that are very, very egalitarian, meaning, so that'll be on the left, but, and also that have administrative bodies that will punish opponents. So it's the very presence of all the diversity committees, all the ways you can punish people for saying things you don't like. This is why the most progressive places in America, like Yale, Amherst, Brown, the schools that are erupting in riots, are the most progressive left-leaning places. And it's because the whole idea of seeing everything as a microaggression only flourishes in those places. But to answer your question, once you get this dialogue of, I've been traumatized, I've been offended against, you've committed violence against me. Once you get people on the left saying that about everything, the few people on the right, and there's often a minority, I mean, there are some conservatives at Yale, Brown, and Amherst, they then start using that language too. So you do see occasional examples of people on the right claiming that they've been traumatized or microaggressed. But it is mostly a left. It mostly comes from the social justice left.
This is a recent phenomenon, but this seems to be of a piece with something that isn't so recent. So, like, for instance, these no-go areas in science, these taboo topics like racial and gender differences in intelligence, the bell curve wars, and, Larry Summers getting into hot water at Harvard. And I think you wrote about this some years ago in an Edge piece. You speculated that mapping the genome is going to open up a much larger front in this war of controversial topics. So have you thought any more about that? I can imagine that this is only making it that much more difficult to touch any of these areas scientifically if you know you can't even talk about them in front of your classroom.
That's right. So political correctness is not new. Even back in the 60s, there were all kinds of things you could not say. There was a big wave of it in the early 1990s and hate speech codes, all that sort of stuff. What's new is the idea that students or people, but especially students, are so fragile that if they're exposed to something that is an offensive idea, they will be traumatized, they will be damaged. And that wasn't there in the 90s. In the 90s, the idea was this is an incredible injustice. You're a bad person for saying this. You're a bad person for studying this. But there wasn't the idea that, oh, you've traumatized people, you've damaged people. So that's new, the idea of fragility. And this grows out. I've learned a lot since Lukianoff and I wrote the Atlantic article. This ultimately seems to grow out of the massive changes in child rearing that happened in the United States after the early 1980s. So if you were born before about 1975, then you had a childhood like people all over the world have always had, which is that you spent a lot of time without adult supervision. And sometimes you got in fights, sometimes you got lost, sometimes you got scared, and you'd figure it out yourself. But we had a real crime wave beginning in the 70s, and there were several high-profile abductions, especially Eitan Pate's, 3 blocks south of where I'm sitting right now in Greenwich. Yeah. And right around the time of Eitan Pate's, just after that, we get cable TV. And once we get cable TV, we have constant 24-hour coverage of every child abduction. So even though pretty much nobody abducts children other than the non-custodial parent, Americans came to fear that if they ever had kids unsupervised, those kids would be abducted. It is literally illegal to let your 8-year-old walk to a park 2 blocks away. You can be arrested for doing that. So parents don't do that. Kids are never without adult supervision until they're mid-teens in many cases. And so what happens is students get to college and they have not had a chance to really deal with setbacks and even insults on their own. There's always been some authority that they should appeal to. So they get to college and somebody says something. Maybe somebody criticizes affirmative action, and that hurts. They don't like it. So what do? They have this whole ideology built for them. They might even have encountered it before college that says that they are a victim of microaggression. Somebody, perhaps a professor, although professors are always on the left, so it might not have been, it's probably more a student. Most of the complaints are actually about students. So some student said something and it hurts. And so you don't say something back, you go straight to the dean or the diversity administrator. You file charges. So this is what's new. This didn't happen 10 or 15 years ago. This is just the last couple of years. They call it accountability. They say we need to hold professors accountable for what they say. But when everybody in the class is holding the professor accountable for not making them feel bad, I mean, it's like being back in, communist Romania or East
Mm.
Germany. You're speaking to the Politburo, and if you say anything out of line, you're in big trouble.
What explains the fact that the adults are caving into this? You've just explained why the kids are coming in like this, but why does the administration yield to this pressure?
Because they have painted themselves into a corner. So two things that have happened. One, there's been rising political polarization in the country. Left and right really, really dislike each other more now than they did 20 years ago. So everybody's more politicized, and the administrators and the professors are almost all on the left now. They used to only be about 70 or 80% on the left, or whatever. It used to be 2 to 1 left to right. Now it's about between 5 and 10 to 1 left to right. So you have everybody's increasingly polarized. Everybody's on board with fighting conservatives. Conservatives are bad. There's a kind of a new religion. In fact, linking back to everything we talked about before, our religious minds have created a new religion of social justice. On campus, the religion is social justice. The most sacred thing in the world is the victim, especially the African American victim. We have blasphemy laws. If someone questions affirmative action, that's blasphemy. It is literally defined as a microaggression to question affirmative action. Eric Posner, son of Richard Posner, associated questioning affirmative action with Holocaust denial. So there are blasphemy laws now. So it's become a religion. And so once this religion of social justice has taken root in the humanities and increasingly the social sciences, now the presidents of the universities, faced with demands from students, cannot say no. They cannot say, in fact, maybe you do need to toughen up. Maybe you just need to, sometimes students are going to say things to you. Maybe some of them are even racist, but, we can't have a committee prosecuting every time someone says something offensive. They can't say that. So what they have to do is they have to say, you're right. As the president of Yale said, we have failed you. So the students give him an ultimatum. They say, President Salovey, we demand that you do these things. You must respond by Wednesday. Now, if you're the president of the university, what should you do? Should you respond by Wednesday? But he has to, or rather, I shouldn't say he has to. He chose to. And so all over the country, presidents are caving, they're giving in, they're validating this victim narrative, and they're promising to do things like more microaggression training, more diversity training, which are going to make things worse. I've been reviewing the literature on this. Diversity training, especially if it's done in a vindictive way, backfires. So it's a disaster. What's going on campus is a disaster.
I'm not on a campus, so I really just have to ask people like you. But my perception of this problem, just reading articles like your own and seeing people push back against it, as you are doing here and as you did in your article, I guess I've been too sanguine about this. My sense was that this problem must be, if not on the verge, at least it's in the process of being pushed back, right? You seem to be saying that it's going to get a lot worse.
What people don't understand, if you're not on a college campus now, if you graduated before 2013, you have no idea what's going on because this only emerged in 2013, 2014 at a few places. And then it spread. Now, last fall is when it spread. So we're now living in a world of social media where ideas can spread so fast that would have taken years before. So if you graduated before 2013, you haven't seen this stuff.
It kind of has the character of what we often call a moral panic.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's a moral panic, but it only makes sense given the new religion of social justice. Social justice has become the religion of the humanities and parts of the social sciences, not the natural sciences. The natural sciences still work like real sciences.
Right. I've been noticing the problems in liberalism of late, and I've called myself a liberal for as long as I've had any political identity at all, and I reliably align with liberal principles on, I check almost every box except once we start talking about things like the clash of civilizations and the problem with political Islam, and then all of a sudden I sound, or at least I'm attacked as something more like a conservative on those topics. But I don't even know why I still call myself a liberal, given how endemic this confusion is in liberalism. And there's something, you don't call yourself a liberal anymore. You're a centrist, right?
That's right. But there's two things going on. So America screwed up the word liberal. We have no idea what it means. So liberal, if just read John Stuart Mill, classical ideas about creating space in which individuals can be free to pursue their life projects. You can't tell me what to do. I can't tell you what to do unless you're hurting me. And here we don't mean hurting my feelings in an indirect way. Unless you're interfering interfering with my life project or hurting me, you can't tell me what to do. So that's liberal. In that sense, you're liberal, I'm liberal. Almost everybody on campus is liberal. Most conservatives are liberal.
Yeah, well, libertarians answer to that description. Yeah.
So that's the word liberal. And in Europe, that's still what it means. We in America began equating liberal with left, and that's a mistake. So I was always on the left, and I think you're saying that you were and are still on the left. As a result of writing The Righteous Mind, I have moved to the center. I'm no longer on the left. I've never voted for Republican, and boy, it's not looking like I'm going to this year either. But I'm no longer on the left. But what's really going on, I think you put your finger on it, is illiberalism. So everybody, all the faculty they call themselves liberal. They're on the left, but there's a huge difference between the illiberal left and the liberal left. The illiberal left is saying, you can't use that word. You have to use this word. You can't wear that clothing. That's cultural appropriation. You must do this. We get to dictate how everybody lives on campus. That is what is happening. And this is emerging not from the faculty on the left. This is emerging from the students, the illiberal left. It's a small group. It's not most of the students. But the liberal left is afraid to stand up to them, because if you stand up to them, you're racist, you're sexist. So all over, on many campuses, I hear this from so many students and faculty. Somebody will say something outrageous. Many people in the room think, oh my God, that's crazy. But nobody has the guts to stand up because they're afraid of being called racist. But look, any virtue carried to extreme becomes a vice. So egalitarianism carried to extreme, as happened under Mao, says, the people, there's the good class and the bad class, is what Mao said. If you're poor, if you're a peasant, you're the good class. If you owned a business, if you're wealthy, you're the bad class. Basically, what we see on campus now with the ideology of privilege, they're the good people and the bad people. The bad people are those who are privileged, which is all white people, all men, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a rabid egalitarianism that I think has become bad. But the other thing, and this is what's new just recently, is the inclusiveness. So inclusiveness is a good thing. We do need to take affirmative steps to make sure we're not inadvertently marginalizing or alienating African Americans, Latin Americans. So inclusivity is a good thing, but carried to extreme, it becomes bad. And what's happened is in this new religion of social justice, the central virtues are inclusivity and equality. And if anyone in the 7 marginalized groups feels excluded, that trumps everything else. And this is where it becomes bad, and this is where it becomes impossible to have a university, because now we can't, I can't say something. I can't present a scientific theory. I can't present, if we're going to talk about why are women underrepresented in the STEM fields, and if a professor were to say, well, actually, prenatal testosterone actually influences what children enjoy doing, might that be relevant? You can't say that. I mean, I just said it, but a professor on the left can't say that.
So you literally, if you were teaching that subject area, you would feel that you actually had to drop that fact from the lecture?
Me personally, I would be very hesitant to say that at NYU, not that NYU is particularly bad, but because that's where they could file charges against me. But if I'm not at NYU, I'm free to say it, because students at other schools can't really do much to me. But yes, students, I've heard from many professors, they are simply avoiding controversy because it's just not worth the trouble. It can take months of your life.
That's incredible.
But again, the point is that once you make inclusion a sacred value, that means no trade-offs. That mere's 7 marginalized groups. So it's African Americans, women, and gay people, LGBTQ. That's the 3 big ones. Then there's Latinos, Native Americans, disabled or mentally ill. So that's 6. That's where we were for the last 10 or 20 years. But just in the last year, now it's Muslims. Muslims are the 7th. So if you say anything that criticizes Islam, or that would anyway make Muslim students feel uncomfortable, that's racism, that's homophobia. So professors are going to be very, very careful from here on in about saying anything critical of Islam.
Interesting. Well, I guess I can claim to have done my part on that particular front.
Yeah, good thing you're not a professor.
Yes. So what do you make of our current political landscape? What's now we are talking at the beginning of March, and Donald Trump seems to be virtually guaranteed to be the Republican candidate, and it seems probably it's also going to be Clinton against him. How do you view our future?
Well, I'm extremely alarmed because I've been tracking the rising polarization for a long time, and it's been growing steadily since the 90s, the degree to which we dislike the other side. but we're at an inflection point this year. So even if at one point people thought, well, what if it's Trump versus Sanders? Even if it's going to be Trump versus Clinton, well, each side. So people on the left are are much more incredulous about the right that they could have nominated Trump. People on the right are absolutely incredulous that people on the left could have considered nominating a socialist to run the country. So I'm extremely alarmed, not just by the things that Trump says, by the belligerence, the risks that I think he'll expose our country to. And also, let me say, while I think Hillary Clinton is can do the job, and I probably will end up voting for her because I don't see any alternative. I don't like a lot of what she stands for, and she is actually going to be really bad on free speech issues. She is going to double down on the idea that there's a rape culture, which is there's not, this is a whole other story, but there's a hookup culture, and because of concept creep, we define everything down. But Hillary Clinton is going to make it even harder to have free speech on campus because she's going to even toughen the laws on what counts as harassment and marginalization, all that stuff. So I'm very upset about our choices, but I'm really concerned about our country because the degree to which we dislike and distrust the other side, it's already made it very hard to have compromise, and Congress, many of them feel if they compromise, they'll really get in trouble from their district. They'll get primaried. It's going to get 3 times worse now. So I'm very alarmed for the state of our democracy.
Yeah, I ran a poll on Twitter, which alarmed me. Obviously, this is just a poll of my audience and random people who happen to get forwarded it. So it's not the general population, and it definitely skews liberal. But what it suggested to me is that there are many Sanders supporters who hate Clinton so much and whose basic platform is just rejecting traditional politics that some significant number of them either will not vote or will vote for Trump.
I don't think that's true. If you go back to 2008, I was one of those people. I really liked Barack Obama, and I really disliked Clinton. And I thought for a while, if Clinton gets the nomination, I would vote for McCain. And that's the way a lot of people felt back then. But once the election comes around. So there's the Bedouin proverb, me against my brother, me and my brother against our cousin, me, my brother, and cousin against the stranger. But almost all of them, if it's Clinton versus Trump, almost all of them are going to vote for Clinton. That's my prediction.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because it looks like it's going that direction. And I think I have all of your reservations, I'm sure, about Clinton, but at least she seems like a grown-up who can do the job and not run civilization off a cliff.
That's right.
So fingers crossed, John.
Well, we do live in interesting times, and you and I are studying the central core of what makes things so interesting, I suppose.